Hey fam, so I'm back to talk about unlearning the good wife training, or as I like to call it because I'm Indian, Indian wife training, which growing up I was basically unconsciously, I think subconsciously trained to do by the people around me in my culture, particularly my parents. And it, what really started to crack this open for me is that, like, I feel like I started waking up really slowly. It was almost as if I was just like getting rid of somebody else's voice in my head that was telling me that I should be doing this, shouldn't be doing that, and what it meant to sort of be a woman, what it meant to be an Indian woman or brown woman, and what does a good woman look like in our culture, in our society. And one of the things that I heard a friend say, who was sharing with me the other day, is a lot of the stuff that makes her angry is she's just starting to see things for what they really are. And, she's like, if I could just go back and tell my 20-year-old self that she was beautiful and that she was brilliant, and that she could also ask for help, like everything would be different. So I want to talk a little bit about, where did this programming begin as I was growing up? It didn't start in marriage, definitely not in my first marriage. It started way, way earlier than that when I was a kid. It's how we are raised, many of us. It's how we were seen to be or perceived to be as good or worthy. And it's what we were told and what was reflected back to us that were things that we needed to keep in mind, that we needed to be. And so, one of the experiences that I had as a young woman is sort of like I was constantly compared to other girls in my community. The basis of comparison was always around my looks, the things that they were doing, culturally, like affiliated with our temple, the fact that they were so nice and demure and polite. I want to believe that he didn't have ill intentions. He didn't know any better. There's been a lot of therapy to work through that, but that was really weird because I was also navigating two cultures. Right, I was an Indian American kid growing up in the southern United States, and I'll talk a lot about this on this channel. So don't worry, we're gonna go deep into what it's like being from the South. But I also would like grew up as a fat kid, which had all of this other stigma associated with it in my community. It's literally like the worst thing you could be. Forget about if I was like an axe murderer or whatever. It's right up there with like not being smart. So, imagine like a fat, awkward Indian kid in the South when no one understood what being Indian was. And we weren't really celebrating Indianness back then. And there was like this clear message from the adults around me as who were from my community. If you are not fair skinned, if you're not thin or shapely, then you don't have worth. If you're not beautiful, then you damn well better be useful. And what being useful mean is doing housework, like assisting in the kitchen, cleaning, doing chores, all of that kind of stuff that also was a mark of your worthiness in the culture. And these were the things that were like the indications of femininity for the adults around me. And so, like I was saying, a lot of my friends who were growing up in the community, friends and non-friends, were doing Indian traditional dance. They were doing Bharatanatyam. One of my really good friends would, around a specific holiday every year, she would fast for like 12 days for a good husband. And there was a group of girls that did this, and they belonged to the Jain community. And, for what it's worth, I think they all got pretty good husbands. Like, none of them are divorced. They all seem to be doing well. But if you weren't sort of doing these things, if you weren't sort of representing your culture at the temple, dancing in public, and were like a soft and demure type of girl who was tiny and didn't take up a lot of space, then you were accepted. And that was like the archetype of femininity, and they were doing it right. And what was told to me is that I was doing it wrong. And it wasn't said explicitly. It's just said in the comparisons, like, oh, she's so beautiful. Oh, look at, she does so well. She dances so well. Oh, Avni, why don't you do this or do that? So I was always on the outside of that. And I always felt, less than. And so what I realized is that, good wife training was being taught to us without explicit words. And I didn't realize it, but all of us were getting trained not to necessarily be nuanced, whole people, but to fit into this mold, and specifically so that we could be good wives and good caretakers to other people. And like this syllabus was unspoken, but it was very, very real. It was very palpable. And the older I got, the more I realized it. So much of this training was about being like the emotional strength for a family. And I know that's super, super common in Black and brown communities around the world. So sisters, if you're hearing this and like you can identify with that, can we please talk about that in the comments? Because this idea that emotional unpaid labor is solely our job as women in the family was sort of drilled into me and was modeled to me in so many different ways. I mean, I could spend hours and hours talking to you about how that was shared with me. We were expected to pick up the slack. We were the secretaries of our families. And we did it because we were told it was our job. Like, it's like there's no option for the men of the family to do this. And this is also a part of what makes you a good wife. A wife who is useful, efficient, who doesn't complain, who just picks up whatever is not being done and does it. And along with that, there's this idea of expressing anger. And that's not being okay. Like, I would only ever see my mom and my aunt and my grandmother express anger very rarely. And that too, they would sort of stuff it all in and they would explode. And I had a conversation with two young women that I work with at my organization on Friday. And we were talking about the fact that, like, in our cultures, and they're from the Middle East, we just stuff down anger and it lives in our bodies and we never deal with it. And it's not only our anger that we're carrying so many generations before us. We're carrying their anger too. So expressing anger is not okay. Expressing displeasure is not okay. You just had to be like the girl that was down for everything. You had to smile through it all. So my first marriage was the beginning of the breaking point for me. I took all of that conditioning into my first marriage, and hello, I am no longer married to that person. And that marriage failed for various reasons. Another topic for another video, but I lost myself in this programming completely. I contorted myself. I made myself small. I put my needs aside. Like, there was so many years that I just wanted to go back to school, but I let my ex do it first because I wanted to support him, and I put my needs last. And ultimately, the marriage broke down, and I was cast aside because I wasn't fun or useful enough in a specific situation where my partner was grieving, and I felt like I had given up so much for him, and that's where the rage started coming in. Like, after our divorce, I started getting effing mad. In fact, one of the things that a really good friend told me to do, shout out to you, Venus, if you're watching this, I know you will be. She's like, Avni, you can't nice your way through these types of situations. And she told me to go break some ish. And I had never done anything like that before. So, and this was well before the advent of things like rage rooms and stuff like that. We have those things now, and I've been several times, and I highly, highly recommend working out your anger at something like a rage room. But I made my own damn rage room, and I went to the thrift store. I bought a bunch of glass items that were cheap. I went to the ceramic studio. I bought a whole bunch of things that students had left behind or that were like not fired. that were lost pieces. And I went to an empty field and I just like started naming things and throwing all of this fragile stuff down. And as it broke, I could feel myself releasing. And then this like overwhelming wave of grief and sadness came over me. And I started crying uncontrollably. That lasted for a few minutes. I mean, I literally thought I was going to stop breathing. And then I was fine because that stuff had just settled in my body, and I was carrying it for so many years. And I think at the back of that, it's like I did everything that I was told. You guys, I fulfilled my end of the bargain. I was a good Indian wife, and I did all of this, and it still wasn't good enough. At the end of that jag of crying was that feeling that like, man, I followed your instructions, and like all I got was a dumbass ex. Another topic for another day. So I went into what I called cave mode. And I have been in cave mode for the past 3 years. And in fact, this conversation with y'all is an attempt for me to come out of cave mode because there's just so much stuff that I've processed that I feel like I want to, tell people and share with people, because I know that I'm not the only one that's processing stuff like this. I can't be. So I took those years back, and I really had to rebuild after going through all of that. And that meant getting very quiet and very still for a long time. And from the age of 43 to 46, I've been in cave mode, and I'm not hiding. I just needed to sit with myself. I needed to reckon with some of this stuff. I needed it to come out of my body. I needed to come out on the other side. One question I was asking myself is like, who the hell am I when I'm not performing for anyone, when I'm not checking all these boxes to be this good Indian girl, this good Indian wife, this good wife programming. And I mean, some of the things that I've been doing just to try to work around that are things like lifting weights and trying new recipes every once in a while. And like, there's so many small acts of self honoring that I'm trying to feel strong in myself and to come back to who I feel like I am. I don't think I ever knew. And I'm starting to learn now, like, who the hell am I? So that's been the way back to myself. It's still happening. And, sometimes I'm like in the middle of a kettlebell swing and I'll feel like some old memory of my dusty ex telling me some BS, or my parents telling me something that I know that's not a part of my reality